Hello, everyone, and welcome to our ISS EDUlearn using ChatGPT and generative AI to foster the 4 Cs. In our webinar today, we're going to be focusing on discovering ways to use cutting-edge technology to help support the 4 Cs: creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking. These are vital skills for success in our rapidly changing world. In this 90-minute virtual session, we're going to explore tangible use cases for these technologies and hear from leading educators about how they are harnessing generative AI to support each of these 4 areas. You'll also discover additional ways to capitalize on the power of ChatGPT and other emerging generative AI tools to create truly personalized and engaging learning experiences for your students. Before we get started, I just want to introduce you to a few folks. Today, we're joined by Molly Faye Nash, our new ISS EDUlearn customer support and technology coordinator. Additionally, we're joined by Mike Pierre, who's our ISS EDUlearn virtual events producer. Together, Molly Faye and Mike work all the magic in the background. Additionally, both Mike and Molly Faye have found a way for you to view all of our recordings after the fact, not only in English, but in Spanish, Mandarin, and Arabic. Please feel free to pose any questions you have in the chat, and we'll do our best to monitor and answer those throughout the webinar. Additionally, you can also feel free to use that to post resources or any ideas or things that you're using so we can continue to learn together. I'm Dana Specker-Watts, the Director of Learning, Research, and Outreach here at ISS. I'm also a self-proclaimed PD addict, so I oversee our professional learning opportunities here at ISS and manage our ISS EDUlearn passport. Here at ISS, we're committed to helping you navigate the upcoming changes that ChatGPT and AI will have in your classroom and in our schools. So we're actively looking for more facilitators and workshops to help you over the coming year. If you have any ideas that you'd like to share with us, please feel free to email us at edulearn@iss.edu. All right. And now today we are really honored to be joined by a series of guest speakers from all across the globe. We have Pascal Vellet from UNIS Hanoi. We also have Joyce Piera, Mark Elroy, and Liz Cho from Korea International School in Seoul. And we'll be joined by Ceci Gomez Galvez from Saigon South in Vietnam. And then without further ado, I want to turn things over to our friend, colleague, and workshop facilitator, John Burns, who's coming to us live from Australia. John's our Chief Innovation Officer here at ISS, and he focuses on sparking creativity and innovation across all our ISS learning communities. So John, please take us away.
Thanks, Dana. As usual, before we kick off, all these slides today and all the resources we speak about and share during the session, not only will you have the YouTube video that obviously you can watch later, but we'll give you a Google Drive link at the end just to a PDF, and everything's embedded in it. So if you're stressing out about taking notes or missing anything, don't worry, because you'll have access to all of it at the end. And really quickly, if you're looking for a way to build your own professional learning network, we use the hashtag ISSEDU to deprivatize teaching and learning, to connect individuals, to share practice. So feel free, if there's anything you find useful during this session, feel free to share it with that Twitter hashtag, or alternatively, we've got a huge amount of professional wisdom within this group. If there are other resources that could be useful or other examples you've seen, feel free to share them to that hashtag, and that'll be beneficial to the whole community. Quick poll. So Mike's got a poll set up, so it should pop up in a second, but I'm just really quickly interested to know, have you participated in one of our previous ChatGPT workshops that we've run? So we've done 2 now, they're about a month ago. I feel like the whole story's changed again since then, and we've sort of been frantically scrambling to, I guess, embed ourselves in these evolving practices. But we'd love to hear that feedback because it will help shape some of the stuff we cover. And maybe we'll focus a bit less on some of those old things if we've got a lot of people here from past sessions, or maybe we'll focus a bit more on them. Getting close to having everyone. I think that's everyone answered, or a lot of them answered. So Mike, but if you can share it, that's really interesting. So we've got about 22% of people have actually attended a previous session. And for those people, there's going to be a lot of new content. We will recap a few things, but hopefully they're evolutions of the stuff we previously spoke to. And if you haven't previously attended one of these sessions, there'll be lots of opportunities to catch up on the stuff you might have missed, but also learn some new strategies and ideas as well. I'm just going to close that. So in terms of the overview of the session, we'll really do 5 things today. One, we'll do a quick recap on, what are these AI tools? What are the popular ones that are being used in education? And then I want to update some of the evolving practices we spoke about last time, which were things like prompt engineering, evaluating responses and assessment, because they've all changed again, even in sort of 3.5, 4 weeks. The story's different again, which is fascinating in itself because these technologies are so sophisticated. We'll briefly talk about why the 4 Cs, why potentially use those to sort of hang your hat on in terms of using generative AI. We'll look at a single snapshot or a set of practical strategies that could be useful for educators in one context. But then we're really fortunate to have our guest presenters today here who are going to dive into a lot of other discrete examples of how generative AI can be used in conjunction with the 4 Cs to really provide more contemporary learning and experiences and opportunities for students. And then at the end, we'll finish it off with a little bit of feedback. We'll have some Q&A built in where you can ask any of the presenters today any burning questions you might have. And then I've got something really cool to show you at the end that's only sort of sprung up in the last couple of weeks. It's a bit nerdy, really, and it takes a little bit of technical know-how. But with the steps I've put in, you can probably just sort of copy and paste your way through it, hopefully, and then try it out for yourself, which is really cool. We'll get to that a bit later. So this is the current landscape, or at least the current landscape as of a couple of weeks ago. There are so many of these generative AI tools out there. And there are ones dedicated for text generation. There are ones for video. There are some that are fantastic at creating images, speech recognition, coding, and some that can do an amalgamation or a meld of those things. You'll see some of the presenters today when they're speaking to their professional areas of practice, talking about different tools. They'll be using some of the different ones that we actually don't address in the main segment, which is really, really cool. But for today, a lot of the content I'm going to be speaking to initially will be focused on ChatGPT, as it's probably one of the premier tools out there, but there are others that are really useful as well. And a lot of what I speak to for ChatGPT will also work just as well within Bing AI and even Bard, Google's solution that's come out recently, which is a little bit less sophisticated and still evolving. But you can sort of take a practice from one AI and generally apply it to others. And we'll see some really other interesting ideas from our presenters today about how they're using other AIs in their context too. What are these things? If we're talking ChatGPT, Bing AI, Bard, there's others around simplicity or complexity, I should say. These are large language models. And so they're just models that are trained on huge sets of data. And if you're talking about the size of the data they're actually trained on, it's the equivalent of, well, in ChatGPT's instance, the equivalent of 300 billion words or something like 5,000 years of nonstop conversation between two people. And what they're really, really good at is based off that training they've done on a really large language model, is they're really great at taking a prompt and then predicting what might come next. In that instance, I just said, how might we leverage ChatGPT in supporting the 4 Cs in pre-K-12 settings? And it sort of breaks it down nicely. I think we can be a little bit more sophisticated in how we do that. And we'll talk about some examples in a minute. And certainly our presenters will talk about some better examples as well as we sort of head down the track. Limitations, definitely. Incorrect information. We'll talk about ways to mitigate that. Definitely harmful and biased content. And we'll talk about some strategies to try and reduce that happening in the classroom. And it has a limited knowledge of the world after 2021 in ChatGPT's instance, though we know that's not necessarily true now. It seems to be recognizing and finding information post that, and you're able to ask questions about nearly anything, as you are with a lot of these other models. There's some emerging research. It's been hard to actually find research related to the use of ChatGPT or Gen AI in education and workforce. But out of MIT, this study emerged recently, and they had 444 professionals engaged a range of different simple office tasks. They gave half of them access to ChatGPT, and the others just had to go about completing their work in their normal fashion. What emerged from that is that the people who had access were more productive. They were able to complete tasks 10 minutes quicker than some of their counterparts on average. The quality of their work improved, though it could be said when looking at the research, that was subjective. There was a panel that was assessing their work, so that may be a level of subjectivity in how they were assessing that. But participants who used it reported a higher satisfaction with the work they were doing. So that's interesting. And there are a few other pieces of research emerging. So certainly keep an eye out for these pieces of information, because it's useful to back the practice that we want to try in our classrooms or in our schools. Let's have a look at the evolving practices. So I put a little sort of seedling sprouting there at the end, because the bit I spoke about, or in regards to prompt engineering previously and evaluating responses and assessment, it's all changed a bit. So I want to talk about what we previously spoke to and then what you might try in addition to that as well. First things first though, how do you sign up? If you've never used ChatGPT before, it's completely free to use, just the basic version of it. You just go to chat.openai.com. You sign up with a username and password as you would with anything. You might find there's a waiting list, or it might say come back later, but generally it's pretty easy to get access now. And then there are paid versions as well you can get access to that give you basically more complex models or more sophisticated models that you can have access to. And you can write lengthier responses sometimes, although responses are a little bit quicker, but the free version's fine. You can get away with a lot just using the free version there. Let's look at prompt engineering. So this is where we're talking about crafting prompts or little questions or statements that basically get the best out of these tools and provide useful information to you as an educator or educational professional. Previously, I only spoke about tasks, but it's evolved now. So I'd say, how do we approach tasks? It's evolved now that we can sort of speak about roles as well. So we can actually engineer individual tasks, or we can engineer entire roles. So I'll give you examples of how each of those work. This is a really basic one. So create a list of ways I could promote the 4 Cs in grade 3. This is typically what you would do when you first encounter a generative AI model. You sort of sit there and just start typing random things in. Some people, it's recipes or fitness plans, different things. But generally in the beginning, you don't know how to start. So it's quite basic. Your interaction is quite simple. And it's pretty good at that, right? It'll come up with a list. It'll say, well, you can do group projects or inquiry-based learning, creative writing. And that seems useful enough, but we can be a little bit more sophisticated in how we prompt ChatGPT and other Gen AI by doing something we're calling currently the Tano prompts, where we say, well, if we're really specific and detailed, what's the task? What do we want the AI to do? Who's the audience? So who's going to be receiving this information and reading it? What are the non-negotiables? The things that have to be included, that absolutely are essential to this being useful to the end user. And then what format? What's the output? What format do I want it in when it's completed? So let's look at that again. So previously I was talking about ways to use the 4 Cs. What if I structure it as a Tano prompt? The task now is to create a list of strategies I could use to promote the 4 Cs within my 3rd grade classroom. The audience, this is for an experienced educator who is responsible for teaching the Common Core at a K-8 school. Non-negotiables. Each strategy must include a task name, brief description, the 4 C it addresses, key steps for practical implementation, Common Core linkages, and online supporting resources. And the output, I want this to be in a table. So it's really easy for me to quickly check and use, cross out the ones I don't want, and address the ones I do want to use. And so you see, I went from a simple bulleted list before, and now I'm getting something more useful and something that's even interactive in a way, because I've got links to online resources. I've got those linkages to the Common Core. I've got steps that I might want to play with, evolve, things I might want to ignore. But it's a far more sophisticated response when you approach it with something like Tano. And there are other sort of frameworks around you might see for engineering these prompts, rather than just typing in a simple sentence or two. That's what we did previously, but prompt engineering, this whole thing's an evolving practice, right? We're now looking at establishing roles. And what ChatGPT and other generative AIs can do really well is they can wear many hats. They can change their personality on a whim. And so if you're quite deliberate in the prompt you give, you can ask ChatGPT to take on the role of an individual or a person or a process. So let's have a look at an example here. So I want ChatGPT to be a math coach now. So I want you to act as a math teacher. I'll provide some mathematical equations or concepts. It'll be your job to explain them to me in easy to understand terms. This could include X, Y, Z. And then in this one, I've said my first request is I need help to understanding how probability works. And then what happens, which is really interesting, when you put it into a role, is ChatGPT stays in that role. It then becomes a math coach for that entire conversation or that entire interaction you're having with the AI, which is really, really cool. So it goes, sure, happy to help. And it starts with it starts with the provocation or the prompt I use and says, okay, here's the stuff you can learn about probability. And here's the way I'm explaining it. What you need to do sometimes when you put ChatGPT or other generative AI into these roles is you've got to tell it to keep calm and stay in character. Like not necessarily keep calm, but occasionally it might drift back and remember something previous. And you just say, remember, you're a math coach. Or remember, you're now a writing tutor. You're going to help me in providing feedback to students. Or remember now you're a personal trainer. You're going to help me develop a fitness plan. Or remember now you're doing software testing. You're looking for efficiencies in code. Or remember now you're helping me generate really great prompts that I can then give to students or to parents or to other educators to help them get better results. So where engineering for us previously, we were just speaking about tasks. We were just speaking to Tano. There are all these great roles that ChatGPT and other generative AI can take on to be of assistance to you. This website's awesome for finding them. So it's called Awesome ChatGPT Prompts, prompts.chat's the address. And they've just got, it's a community that just keep adding more and more of these prompts for generating these roles so that you can have basically a coach. And I'm sure a lot of you are already thinking, well, I could potentially use it for providing feedback. It's a coach on expository essays for middle school students. It's just going to coach them on that. They provide their essay and then it helps them through identifying, or it supports them in inquiry and science, or it supports them with mathematics in, not middle school, but like upper elementary. There are so many really cool roles built in there already. There's even ones you could potentially contribute if you wanted to as you explored these sort of things. So there's a prompt engineering as an evolving practice. And then we talked about evaluating responses, making sure that the information we're receiving is true and useful. Because the problem with these tools is, and they sort of call it out right at the beginning when you start using ChatGPT, it flashes up on the screen, that sometimes they can provide information that's plausible. It sounds like it's correct, but it's actually not. And there's a really interesting term they're using to refer to this now. You've probably heard of it. It's AI hallucination, where based off these huge language models that these AIs are trained on, they come up with some pretty wacky responses sometimes, things that are incorrect, or even things that aren't wacky, but that sounds truthful. It sounds like it could be real. And if it sounds real to us as educators and people who are used to examining and synthesizing and analyzing information, how might that sound to a student? And how might that change the direction of their learning? So it's really important we look at ways to effectively evaluate responses. And there's a number of ways to do that, and they're evolving as well. Of course, we get a lot of fakes now. This isn't specifically from ChatGPT, and I think Mark might be speaking to this a little bit. But you've got to be able to recognize when things are fake. Like, the Pope wasn't dressed in drip recently, even though it made a number of newspapers around the world. Trump didn't get arrested in that fashion. It may have happened in another fashion, but that photo is not real. And so these AI tools are also creating imagery, which is not true or is incorrect or shows a partial truth. So the evaluation is really, really quite critical. They're also providing unethical applications. There are so many examples online where you type in, I don't know, bad things ChatGPT's done, and it will have you mining credit card numbers or developing malware or teaching you how to hotwire a car. There's lots of this stuff out there. And people have even found a way to sort of strip back the ethical rules ChatGPT and other generative AI run by and just teach them anything. So there's certainly that to sort of mitigate as well. And then without a doubt, there is bias, there's lack of diverse representation in the responses, there's racism, there's stereotypes, given the data that these tools have been trained on. So it's really important that we evaluate responses to try and mitigate all these different potential problems that could occur when we use them as professionals, if we choose to support students in using them as well, when we're discussing these things with parents, when we're discussing these things with school leadership and colleagues too. So this is a really simple example we looked at. It's evolving again, of course, but one of the popular tools for evaluating resources online and tools, references or information we use in schools. And I was taught this by a librarian, is the CRAP test. You know, kids sit down with a rubric and they look at currency, you know, is this timely information? Relevance, is it relevant to the topic I'm looking at? Does the person or people that wrote this have authority to write about it? Is it accurate? And, you know, why does this exist? Is there any potential bias or is it misleading? What's the purpose behind it? And so the CRAP test, there's CAPAL, there's DRAMA, there's a lot of these sort of different acronyms out there to help students evaluate resources online. And we can take these and we can apply them to ChatGPT and other tools as well. So in this instance, I think I showed this one last time quickly. I said, you know, quickly write 2 sentences on the cause of World War I. And it went through and did that. And then I said, well, use the CRAP evaluation on the above reply now. And the reason I used CRAP then was because it didn't know the other tools. When I started asking it to do CAPAL and other things, it didn't actually know how to do that. So I said, you know, use the CRAP evaluation on that World War I reply and then score each section out of 5. And so this could be really useful when you're evaluating responses because A, you need to read it yourself and evaluate with your own professional judgment. And kids still need to know how to use CAPAL, but it's a nice provocation. It's a nice stimulus. It's a nice tool to assist those students who need it in doing their assessments because these tools have the capacity to evaluate themselves as well. You don't want to just rely on that by any stretch, but it's nice to know that that's built in there. And I think, what does it give it? 20 out of 25 when it scored itself. But evolving practices, right? This has changed again now. And I love this example of choose your own adventure because you can choose your own anything. This is something that we've started doing more of now, is that you can take any framework, any criteria sheet you have, any rubric, evaluation goals, metrics, whatever it is, you can copy and paste it into ChatGPT and then say, can you apply that framework that I provided you to this? And it will do it. And often you'll find when you're copying and pasting, like a lot of the work we have in terms of those frameworks and rubrics and metrics, it's often in a table format and you copy and paste it into something else that looks horrific. ChatGPT doesn't even care. Even if it's an absolute mess, it seems to be able to figure out and make sense of it and then still apply it. So that's really, really useful to know. I like this a lot. If you're worried about using ChatGPT and you're worried about evaluating responses or just what might come out of it, this is a workflow that emerged, it was about a month ago, I think, from Alexander Turchinov, and he shared it online. And it says basically, is it safe to use ChatGPT? So this could be a conversation to have with students or parents. And it could even evolve further, but starting off with, does it matter if the output is true? If it doesn't matter, you're fine to use it. You're doing fun recipes, you're coming up with fun games, using around the house. If it does matter, you jump down a bit further and it goes, well, do you have the expertise to verify that it's true and accurate? Now, if this is related to education and our roles, then yeah, we probably do. We probably do have the professional judgment as long as we proofread it and check it out to make that call. If you go to yes, it then asks something else interesting. Well, are you willing to take full responsibility, morally, ethically, I guess legally in some cases for some things? And if you can do those things, then it's probably okay to use it. If not, then it's probably not okay and it's unsafe. And I think the key one is really that professional judgment. Do you have the expertise in professional judgment? I don't think you'd want to be taking medical advice. I'd even be a little bit cautious about fitness plans or diet requirements, because we know that these tools can have those hallucinations. And unless we have the professional expertise to judge them, to examine them, analyze them, then we probably don't want to use it for that. So that might be a nice one to have a discussion with students about. And I'm sure it could even evolve and become a little bit more useful in terms of the educational context. So we did really quickly that our prompt engineering has evolved a bit. We're now looking at roles as well. Our evaluations evolved a bit because we know we can apply pretty much any framework for evaluation to content within ChatGPT, and it will use it. And the last thing we briefly touched on was just assessment, because there's a lot of this sort of stuff straight away. Everyone was worried about cheating and plagiarism and academic dishonesty. And for traditional assignments, ChatGPT can be quite good at doing them in reality. It can actually produce professional or sophisticated answers. And you've probably seen examples of medical exams being passed and, university level, engineering exams and all these sort of things being passed by these tools. And so people were, I guess, justifiably worried about cheating within schools. But I don't think we have to worry about it too much. And I sort of used this example last time. If a kid who's been just cruising along and doing okay throughout the entire year suddenly starts coming in with amazing work and amazing stuff they're only producing outside of school and giving it to you, your spidey senses are going to go off, right? You're going to be like, hang on a sec, this doesn't seem right. And I couldn't figure out what was the professional way to say that, but I was lucky to be in Damien Cooper's workshop a little while ago. And he said, well, what we're really doing in that instance is assessment triangulation. When we're making judgments about performance, we're not just relying on the left, the products, the tests, the essays, the projects. That's one part of assessment, whether it's formative or summative. We're also engaging observations and what students do in class and how they engage with others and what they're actually producing in class themselves. And then we're also having conversations and we're doing that conferring. And it's when those three things happen, you can have a better chance of effectively evaluating a student. I don't think there'd be many of us that are only relying on those written products, those things that have the potential to be exploited by generative AI. There's also a huge or significant argument to say a lot of that assessment maybe isn't entirely worthwhile anyway. Anything you can just copy off the internet probably isn't entirely useful to you, but that's for later. But yeah, just remembering that, when we're making these judgment calls, we triangulate the assessment and we use different tools to assess how a student is progressing and making their journey with learning. That was the recap. So I just bumped my whole camera. Sorry. Let me see if I can fix this up. Prompt engineering's changed a little bit. Evaluation's changed a bit. And assessment, we really want to have that triangulation in place. Time-wise, we're good. So why focus on the 4 Cs? Why is that perhaps a good framework to use when we're looking at generative AI tools? There are a huge range of them that are out there. And I think there's a couple of reasons. One, they're critical 21st century priorities. We know employers are looking for different things than those they hire these days. They're looking for students or employees that can deal with ambiguity, that can independently learn and inquire, that communicate, work part of a team, collaborate. We know they're things that all employers are looking for. And you frequently see in the press, particularly from a lot of those big Fortune 500 companies. We know they're critical to contributing to society and being a good member of society, and critical to innovation as well, and creating new products, things, services. They're really good to sort of focus on because they intersect pretty much all curricular frameworks, whether you're looking at the learner profile or whether you're looking at curriculum itself, or whether you're looking at the ways we're assessing, or we're looking at the learning experiences in classrooms. You'll see elements of the 4 Cs either explicitly or on the sort of extraneous elements of all of the major curriculums that our schools engage with. And certainly, they're embedded in a lot of contemporary pedagogies and practices, whether you're into maker-ed constructionism, social constructivism, inquiry, problem-based, project-based learning, blended, game-based learning, all of these things. These 4 Cs come up time and time again. So it's a really easy way for people to find something useful, particularly just find something useful that they can hang their hat on and use when they go back to their classrooms. So I'm going to go through and do sort of a snapshot of what this might look like in one context. And then we're going to be inviting our panelists to share what it potentially looks like in their context as well. And what I think we'll see is not only different grade levels, different pedagogies, different curriculum frameworks, but we'll see a range of different tools being used as well. Not just ChatGPT, not just some of the bigger names that we've seen out there. And I want to say, actually, before I dive into it, I nearly forgot, is as I was sitting down and planning this, I was like, okay, what's a really good way to look at creativity? Or what's a really good way to look at collaboration? And what immediately becomes apparent, and anyone who's taught realizes it, is that these things don't happen in isolation. You don't have a learning experience or an activity that's just focused on creativity, or one that explicitly focuses on just communication. And I think actually when I was speaking to the panelists and sort of chatting about what they might like to share, they were all sort of saying, well, it is a bit communication, but it's also critical thinking and there's a bit of creativity. They're not something you do by themselves. And so I've sort of called them out as separate, but the second I start talking, you're going to start seeing where those intersections happen. And then I can't wait to hear what the panelists have to say as well. Sorry, I'm just going to quick drink water. All right, context. So I'm going to focus on this context. So I'm going to imagine we're exploring the Sustainable Development Goals with middle school students. In particular, we're looking at SDG 7, which is about affordable and clean energy. And what we're really looking at is feasibility and sustainability of renewables. That's what the real crux of the work is we're doing. In terms of the learning experience and the pedagogy, I'm hoping to have a collaborative environment, team-based inquiry that promotes the use of the 4 Cs. That's sort of the structure or the context of what I'm proposing. And so in terms of how I might use ChatGPT or how I might use generative AI, there's a million ways. But what I want to do in this instance is just look at how might ChatGPT assist with that initial learning design. So as I'm going through structuring the scope and sequence documents, I'm thinking about the individual students in my class. I'm thinking about the type of learning experiences they might engage in. I'm thinking about the type of assessment and the ways they might showcase their learning and how I'm going to observe that. How do I go through that process? So I'm really looking at how a teacher might use this, either by themselves or working with the other group of teachers to set up a series of learning experiences for students that are looking at that SDG 7 and renewable and sustainable energy. So it's not just collaboration, but let's start there. So for collaboration, I know something as an educator is that often if I want to get groups to collaborate, it's really quite useful to use a strategy like de Bono 6 hats, to give them a provocation to explain what the 6 hats are about, and then have them work in teams to either address a single hat. So I might have teams working on just being a red hat, just being a black hat, or to address all of them and then compare and contrast their results. So have some sort of opportunity for them to share their understanding and then compare and contrast between what other teams got. So if I'm involved in that initial learning design, I can use ChatGPT and these other tools to sort of predict what might happen, to help me anticipate what that learning experience might look like with those students, what might evolve, what might come out of it. And that'll help me then plan ahead. So I go, well, as a result of this happening, then I'm going to have a better idea of how the next learning experience might go. So you can see there I said, analyze the feasibility and sustainability of renewables using de Bono 6 hats, include descriptions of what each hat means, and providing a table for it. I just like tables. It works really well for this stuff. And there we go. So I've got the hat colors straight away down the side. It gives me those descriptors. And then it gives me an example of, what could be the results from each of those individual investigations. So that's good for me as I'm planning, because now I've got a sense of some of the topics that I might want to address or things that have been missed. It potentially acts as a provocation. I could give one of those renewable energy analysis points to groups to sort of get them thinking. It helps with individual learning support. Some students might need a bit more information, and I can provide that to them as well. And so it's a really quick and efficient way to kick off that learning design, give me a sense of what might happen, and then what I might want to do next as a result, while also thinking about being more inclusive with learners. So I looked at collaboration. Now I'm like, okay, critical thinking. So I really want to start talking about evaluating long-term consequences of the impact of fossil fuels. So why might be better to use renewables than fossils? We have to look at why fossils are not the path to head down. And I know as an educator, life cycle assessments are a good way to do that. Again, what I can do is ask for that to be produced. It gives me each step of the life cycle stage. I can see the environmental, social, and economic impacts. And so then I can decide how I want to frame the discussions, how I want to frame the investigation, whether I want groups to focus on individual stages, whether I want them to look at environmental or economic. So it gives me options in determining how to approach that learning experience based off the information it provides me in a really rapid way. And again, what's missing, what's not included, what do I want to take away as well? Communication. So they've done some sort of investigation using de Bono 6 hat analysis and synthesis. They've gone through some critical thinking with that data and seen how it might apply to the life cycle. Communication now, well, I want to have some discussion. I want to have some role play with students. And I want them to explore the renewable energy sector and perhaps the different stakeholders that are engaged in the renewable energy sector. So in this instance, I've said, create a potential role play scenarios for students who are exploring this. Consider the various stakeholders and diverse perspectives. So essentially, I'm asking it to come up with a role play scenario or activity with the characters sort of already developed and with some talking points to give the students something to start with as they're going through these role plays. And so I can really quickly produce that. And I think it's got a few: wind farm, solar energy for a school, hydropower plant expansion. It provides those scenarios. It actually had a lot more, and I just cut it down there. It gives me potential roles in there, some potential talking points for students that need it as well, and sort of sets up an activity that I can then run and students can then engage in, and then we can also reflect on the learning that happens during that time. But again, you can see that there's collaboration happening in this. There's creativity in how they approach the characters. There's critical thinking in how they respond to the different conversations they're having as well. And creativity. So now I'm sort of starting to think about, well, how might I be able to effectively make judgments on what students know and can do during this time? And so I can prompt it in that regard. So I can say, well, identify creative ways students could explore and showcase their understanding of renewables by team-based projects. Now, in this instance, I cut this prompt down a bit because it was really quite lengthy, but it was a similar Tano prompt to the one I showed you earlier, where we were talking about addressing the 4 Cs in that grade 3 classroom. So it's quite a lengthy prompt. But then straight away, I've got potential activities students can engage in. So biomass generator or energy generator, wind turbo design, a whole bunch. I've got subjects that they potentially cover within the curriculum. I've got a project they can work on, some key steps they might engage in, and then resources that could be useful to them as well. So it's a really useful tool if I'm thinking about that initial learning design to help me explore what potentially could happen, to create resources rapidly to support those learning experiences, and also to support individual students that might require more assistance. But again, as always, I'm evaluating the results of those. I'm synthesizing what's created to making sure it's truthful, and finding what's not present sometimes, what's not within the content, what do I need to add to make it more relevant to the context of the grade levels I'm teaching. Like evaluating responses, you can choose your own approach. I might be a teacher that loves design thinking. I think design thinking is the best and it's really useful and it is fantastic, but I use it a lot in my classrooms. What is it like to intersect those two things? What does a framework look like that has design thinking and the 4 Cs integrated? I can take that approach. So I can have a pedagogical approach or a learning design approach, and I can get it to sort of synergize or intersect with the 4 Cs or any other topic I want. So regardless if you're doing project-based learning, game-based, maker ed, design thinking, blended learning, you could say, what does it look like to integrate problem-based learning with the 4 Cs in a middle school context on topic X? I need resources, common core standards, blah, 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 boom. Or what does it look like to use a specific design thinking strategy? Or what does it look like to use a specific prototyping strategy? It's really, really useful to know that you can take any framework. If it doesn't know it, you can copy and paste it and teach it, and then integrate those 2 things. This is the best bit. Snapshots of practice. I'm right on time too. That's perfect. 42. So this is where we get a chance to listen to educators from a lot of different international schools around the world who've been doing or implementing, or sorry, I should say leveraging ChatGPT and generative AI for a range of different purposes. First off the rank, I'm really lucky to have Liz and Joyce. I've worked with Liz for a number of years. She's curious. She can see big picture and drill all the way down to practical. She's always trying new things. She's currently at Korea International School as a principal of teaching and learning, but I believe she's moving to Laos. She's got a nice promotion and moving over there soon, which is exciting. And Joyce only recently met at a conference. We were in a session together, and I was immediately struck by how deeply she thinks, not only about pedagogy, but about design thinking and computer science. So I was excited when Liz said that she'd be joining us to share some practice as well today. I'll stop sharing. Thank you for coming along. I can't wait to hear what you're going to speak about.
Thanks so much, John. In my role, I'm so lucky because I get to work with teachers from all divisions, and it's really incredible and awesome. And so teachers come to me to bounce off ideas, collaborate, and think together through some of their lessons and units. And while I thought about sharing with you a list of ways that my team of coaches work with teachers or work with ChatGPT for planning and curriculum, I thought it would be pretty cool to just bring in one specific teacher who's doing actually amazing things, not just a thing, with this within our classroom to promote that critical thinking and collaboration. Joyce came to me wondering if it'd be appropriate to let our high school students create their own ChatGPT accounts and have them interact with AI on their own. Now that age for creating an open AI account had dropped from 18 to 13 with parental consent. So things are changing so quickly, right? And in this process of thinking together, we came up with the idea of creating an assignment where the students would have to connect with their parents and show them what ChatGPT is and how it works. I get this incredible honor of having these collaborative conversations with teachers. And of course, the actual hard work is done by the teachers themselves with the students. So I turn it over to Joyce to share with you this example that she has to gift to us in terms of how AI is able to promote that critical thinking and collaboration, not only between peers and then peer to teacher, but from students to parents at home. So without further ado, Joyce, I turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen. I think y'all can see it. I hope you can see it. All right. So just thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts, and I'll just go ahead and get started. So having the 4 Cs in mind, I wanted to give some context. I teach under the high school design and innovation team, but I teach AP, CSA, and Java, and I teach the programming course as well. And my focus this semester has been AI. And so what we've done at this time is we've been looking at these 5 concepts: human needs, empathy, equity, innovation, and impact. And our unit right now is on meeting human needs with empathy so that we can have equity, innovation, and impact. And some of the things that my students are familiar with, so you can have some context moving into what we actually did in the prompts, they know that innovation is about using available knowledge and resources to meet human needs and enhance human experiences. And we practice looking around and having the eyes to see the opportunities that exist. And so when this generative AI tools emerged, we saw it was an opportunity to be innovative and to use the new and emerging technology to help extend and enhance our human experiences. And during our time together, we also look at the patterns of innovation. And when we talk about AI and tools, one of the patterns that stands out to us is that if we can go further and faster with these kinds of tools. And that has proven quite true with all the examples that were given. We can plan faster, we can generate possible solutions and ideas faster, and take our learning further in a shorter amount of time. And when I work with my students, we ask ourselves, well, what are questions worth our time and energy? Because we have a limited amount of time and energy to design solutions and to work with the clients that we have. And we agreed upon as a school and also with our students that the SDGs are questions worth our time and energy. And we want to be able to provide and design ideas and solutions that will reach and meet these SDGs in a faster way than we have been at this point. So talking about prompt engineering, here's one of the contexts that I gave my programming students as they're coding and learning a little bit of Python so that they can generate some AI algorithms. So the prompt was that they would get 3 wishes. And I posted this as a discussion board since I wasn't sure that students were allowed to have their own accounts. I said they could use mine. So they would, on our discussion board, share their prompt. And from this space, I would respond to them with whatever ChatGPT and or Bing responded with. So here's an example where a student wanted to create a Python program that would find the frequency of a word in a file. And I gave back the code that was generated by ChatGPT, and the student was then expected to put it in an online platform to make sure that it would work. And so here is the student copy pasting and running the program, and it does do exactly what it was supposed to do and was it intended to do. So now we're programming and designing solutions a little bit faster without having to debug and look for that silly semicolon that always gets lost. And again, just that idea of using available knowledge and resources in creative ways, using ChatGPT and or Bing, we're looking at ways to refine our current understanding of clients' problems and inspire our next steps. And so some of our students are looking at for example, what are 10 tips that a high schooler can implement into their daily lives? And so it generated some solutions from ChatGPT, and I gave them also a screenshot of what Bing gave, so they could then compare and contrast and see which ones they would like to use. We also did it in table format. A student wanted actionable steps to reduce the greenhouse effect, and they wanted to see what would a weekly plan be. And then they kind of analyzed as the human, which one would be actually doable. And then they kind of zoomed in on one. So they said, let's spend a month on that by week. And what are some plans that we could do to reduce energy consumption by week, as an example? And so I would sit with the students as I conference with them, and I would have my ChatGPT and Bing open. And as they asked questions and wanted to know more prompts, I would have this open with them and sharing it back with them on their discussion boards. And so again, just some examples of how they were looking at reducing meat consumption and then generating like, oh, can it generate recipes of what we could eat? And they just kept asking more and more questions and just getting different results to help them brainstorm and think about what they could do and put into their solutions. They've been learning that the AI results will be as simple or as sophisticated as their level of literacy. I'm encouraging them to use their computational language and words so that the tool will generate what they want more closely. And so these are just some of the examples that I would like to share that we implemented into our programming course this semester. At the end, like Liz was saying, we summarized what we did, and we decided to generate a slideshow that the students could share with their parents. And at the end, they were expected to have a conversation about these tools and invite their family to share their own feedback on this technology and capture their responses. And here are some of the reactions and questions that the families provided to their students and that they shared back with me and as a class. And so there was a lot of interest, really a lot of excitement, but then some concerns as well. We looked at reactions, questions, and concerns. A lot of what we have seen and noticed with the teachers and adults, a lot of this is being mirrored with the families as well. So it was very helpful to see the students bridge and make that connection with their families, as Liz mentioned before. And so the way that we see these interconnected 4 Cs is There's a lot of creativity and creative thinking around literacy and prompt engineering. There's a lot of collaboration with their teachers, their peers, using discussion boards and the AI tools themselves, and creating a stronger way of communicating with their families about what's happened in the class and bridging those conversations at home. Thank you.
That is amazing. I think everyone's going to two birds with one stone, really. So not only are you educating students about the safe and effective ways to leverage these technologies, they're bridging with parents. It's just so smart. Like bringing them into the classroom, making a classroom transparent, connecting them with their students' learning, connecting them with the collective learning of the group, and then bringing them on board. Like that's, yeah. All right. I've got some work to do in that area. Thank you, Liz and Joyce, so much for sharing. That's wonderful. Yeah, and everyone loved it as well. I can see Twitter and the chat as well. Thank you. Next up, we've got Pascal Ballet. And I at first, when Pascal reached out to me, I thought he was also at UNIS in Hanoi, because that's been all our interactions sort of being in Asia and Australia. But he's actually based at the school in New York. I had one conversation with him and got incredibly excited about the work he's doing. He's not only has a deep understanding of teaching and learning, but he's very technical as well. And he can do a lot of the development work, which is fascinating because he can marry the two and produce some really interesting work. So Pascal, thank you for joining us today.
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night to everyone. So yes, I'm based in New York. I'm the junior school principal at the United Nations International School. So I'm an educator, but I've also been in charge of academic and technology in the school here at the UN school. And when I was working in Asia for a couple of years, I was helping also the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs to develop some technology for the French school in Asia. And I know that I have a colleague from 10 years ago that is in the audience right now. So pretty nice to know that some old colleagues are joining us. So what I'm going to share with you is a bit different that way we talk here. I look at I'm going to share with you a journey with technology, and how at some point the AI came in this journey and can increase the possibilities a bit, as Joyce has explained, how it can enhance, how it can allow us to go deeper, faster. This is this journey. It's a bit the journey that Einstein had at some point with a mathematician, a German mathematician, and I forgot his name, where Einstein was working on this relativity and he couldn't go further. And suddenly there is this math theory that came and allowed him to go further. And so I had a journey trying to use technology in order to enhance the work that we're doing at school. And it was purely on an operational perspective. And when I was looking at technology, and also when I was the academic director of technology here at UNIS, I was really looking at the technology as an extension of our mind. And there is this Canadian philosopher, McLuhan, who was saying that the medium is the message. And so basically the technology that we use is going also to influence our thinking. So it's not only a tool that is going to help us to do ABC, but the tool that we're going to use is going to influence this ABC. And so our vision of the world is going to be influenced by the technology. And over the last 20 years, what I've experienced using technology is often what I was trying to achieve was limited by the technology itself. So by what other people have designed in order to help me in some specific task, for example. But I was going to be able to do what these people have decided that I would be able to do. So there was this tension that I have with the technology. And so when we look at the AI also as a medium, this medium is obviously going to influence the way that our teachers are going to think or process, the way that our students are going to learn. And so it can be, as Joyce was explaining, a great extension of our mind and really allow us to go deeper, but it's really depend on the way that we're going to utilize also this technology. And that, I think, it's probably the principle, as a principal perspective that I have, is to be able to see how the greatness of the tool, but also to see how it's going to make us not necessarily better and not necessarily make the world a better place. And if I say that the world a better place, it's because for UNIS, we want to make the world a better place. And so this is really the initial vision that I had on technology, We believe that technology should serve our ideas and processes, not the other way around. Instead of simply adopting pre-designed systems, we see technology as a tool to help us achieve our goals and values. And we cannot have like some limitation on that. We cannot have some technology who's going to that. Yes, I mean, it's a great idea, but however, I'm not designed to support your vision. I'm not designed to support your values. And unfortunately, it's often the case. If we look at school management system, report card system, we do what the system is designed for. And if we feel that our report card system could do something much better, well, if we don't design it ourselves, and if we don't have the technology to design it ourselves, the report card is going to do what someone else in the office on the other side of the world has decided that the report card will do. So we want to be able to see the technology in a way that is going to do what we want the technology to do. And in some ways, how the technology, by opening possibilities, and AI is here for that, how it's going to allow us to expand this vision and those values, but not to limit them. So that's really, that was really my journey here. And so in that journey, I've started to work on automatization. There is some really interesting research in the non-education world, in the world where people need to produce to create some revenue. They're really, really sensitive to be able to not waste time and to be efficient, because they have a direct impact with the revenue. In education, it's very different. We don't measure our success with the revenue. We measure our success with our students are able to achieve and give the best of themselves. And so it's a much more difficult way to measure a result. However, we are an organization that need to be able to realize some tasks. So what I've done is starting to work on designing automatization. And so I've created many different applications for organizing field trip, for substitution, and this is working exactly the way that I want it to work. And I initially starting this work because because looking at the case of discrimination in schools and looking at the Black Lives Matter movement also in the US, I really wanted to be able to expand the way that I was going to deal with incident and emotional support for my student. And there is no tool that I've seen that will allow me to be able to keep track of racial discrimination or gender discrimination, religious discrimination in the way we wanted it to be. And so I'm starting to design this tool. And so I've designed a couple of tools. I designed some tool for job fair. I've designed some tools also for like newsletter for our faculty that is generated automatically, et cetera, et cetera. And all this, I was using a database. And that was really fascinating how we were able to save a lot of time. And when we have 3 people working on the substitution process, for example, we have only one now, and it's much more efficient. And she's going to send 20, 30 emails in the morning, but none of them that she has written. And this is not generated by AI. It was generated by automatization and me creating all the infrastructure behind. And then the AI was coming, and very recently, like in January, I start to look at it. I have a friend who is also a parent at school who is working in the medical field and was able to get access to OpenAI and to get an agreement with them to be able to develop some application, etc. So I get very interesting by that. And the first thing I was thinking is, so how am I going to use it? At Joyce, I've done, how can I use it with my student? And I look at it in the more in how this ChatGPT is going to be used, but how I'm going to not be dependent on the way that ChatGPT is designed. And so basically here, the question that we have of giving access to ChatGPT to our student is based on the fact that, well, they can decide the prompt. So in what Joyce shared with us, she asked the student to create the prompt. She is the filter for the prompt, basically. And so she get the prompt, she put it in the system, she give it back to them. So she can have an educational impact on what the students are going to do. But if we give them the access like this is where we can go in some places where we don't necessarily want the student to ask a specific question, not because because it's a process of learning. What Joyce is doing is not only an end product. What Joyce is doing is a process, is a student being able to reflect, to search. The reflection of the prompt is super interesting. It's not just the answer, it's the reflection. And so I wanted to see, can we do something about it? Can we, rather than to be afraid that the students are going to ask the question and get the answer and just copy and paste, because we're not going to do the triangle that John was sharing before, because we're looking more at the end product, can we try to create this interface with the work that I've been doing in the automatization? And maybe I'm going to be very fast here. What we know that the technology, the AI can do, the AI can personalize learning. We know that the AI also could be used to develop some very intelligent tutoring system. We can anticipate that TOK exploration could be fascinating with this access to this ton of data that is available, and now the AI will help. And it has helped me a lot as a school principal to be able to do my research when I want to talk about sustainability and write something about what Vanuatu have done recently at the UN to save the earth. It can also facilitate interdisciplinary connection because the AI can create connection between subject area. So there is a lot of things that the AI is able to do in the educational field. Now the question is, who is going to design this? Who is going to design for us those tools that are going to do what we want those tools to do? Again, to connect to my initial vision on technology, which is we're not victim of the technology, but we own the technology and we ask the technology to do what we believe is right to do. One thing that's really captured my attention with the way that ChatGPT was designed is this natural language processing, and how this is really in everything that John shared with us. In all this technology is using language and can in fact process arguments, give some evidence, give some feedback, and support critical thinking for a student. And so I look at specifically this idea here. And if I combine the idea of Joyce to be able to bring the student to use ChatGPT in order to be able to enhance and go deeper in the product that they're going to create, what I've done here is try to say, okay, can I create an interface that will allow my student to use directly ChatGPT, but not by jumping inside ChatGPT, not by necessarily needing the support of a teacher to bring them to use ChatGPT, but by creating a layer that will do what I want it to do. And so that's basically what I've tried. And this is really experimental because there is so many other people, not necessarily in the educational world, that are doing what I'm going to show you today, where they create some application using the API from OpenAI. So OpenAI is the company that have created ChatGPT. They have created an API, and what an API is doing, it's allow you to integrate the engine into a system. And so suddenly, I was able to bring into the system that I've designed AI thanks to the API from OpenAI. Voilà. So I hope it's not too technical here. I'm just going to show you what it looks like. So what I've designed here as a test, and I tested it with some high school students, is to try to create a form. And this form, the student can put the name, can select the grade level, and can select a subject. So the system I've designed is for mathematics and writing. It works a bit less well in mathematics, but the writing is pretty impressive. And then what the high school student did here was to test by choosing what kind of question they would like to submit. And here, for example, is a question relating to writing assignment. Another example that I had here, another option was review my draft and give me feedback on my draft. So here, the students want to be able to get some support to start the task. And we have some students who have difficulty to start a task. And here, it's a tool that would help. The type of prompts, and here what I've done here is the possibility, for the example, for the teacher to add an element in the prompt. So to say that here, for example, I want the student to use specific adjective that was going to describe emotion and realize to surprise, connected to surprise and fear. So what I have here, the student can put the prompt, can put the assignment, and the teacher could inject in the system some element. I want you to look at that. I want the student specifically to reflect on this. I want the student to use description. I want the student to reflect on the use of adjective, for example. We put the writing assignment, and there is a question that the student can ask. And the student here asks, can you tell me fact about Mars because I don't know, and help me to start, okay? And for the purpose of the test here, we can say, give an answer to this assignment too. Okay, so this is not a tool that I'm using for teaching the student. It's a tool that I've designed to see how we can create an interface using ChatGPT to help to create a support system for our student. And the result is here. So the result is like, first some fact about Mars, because the student is asking some fact about Mars, and then 6 tips to be able to complete this assignment successfully. And then after, the AI is generated an example. We've tested it also, we submitted a draft, and same thing, the system was going to give some feedback. Now, what is very important is where John's work was fascinating to me, and that's why I've been in touch with him, is behind the scene here, we have a system, and here all the green spots here are some ChatGPT engine, okay? And the way it's designed is, what we can do is we can create prompt. So all the prompt that John has shared at the beginning, you can basically put them already in the system. You can decide how the system is going to reflect. So when John was saying you want to be a coach, for example, you can, the teacher, the educator, the IT team could create system where we inject already the prompt. So what we do here, we don't let the students design all the prompt itself. The student go and I have an assignment here. I have difficulty to start. I don't know about Mars. Can you help me? But the way that I've designed the prompt here is to say, well, I'm okay to help the student, but I want you to be able to use some very specific tips. And I want you these tips to use the, for example, the TC approaches in writing. Or I want you to get inspiration from Hemingway. You will get your answer because we are looking at Hemingway right now. And so this is where I feel when you look at Joyce's work, when you look at John's work here, and when we bring the technology here, we could design system that will allow us to have the student independently accessing support in their writing. And so let's go to the next slide here. And so what are the next steps for me on this work here? It's very experimental here, but it's going really fast. I mean, John has shared some example of application that exist already in the AI world. My question is, are we going to let others design the support system for our students tomorrow? Or are we going to be, because we have expertise, because we are educator, are we going to be the one who are going to design it? And so I think we need to work together to design this application. So it's not going to be what other people have decided for us. And I have started to work with a parent who say he has a team of 35 people. They create application for the finance world in Wall Street, and they want to work for something that may be a bit more like align with their value and their sense of humanity. And so maybe that's the beginning of a journey here, and it's going really fast. So I wanted to finish with this quote from a physicist and AI researcher. Everything we love about civilization is a product of intelligence. So amplifying our human intelligence with artificial intelligence has the potential of helping civilization flourish like never before, as long as we manage to keep the technology beneficial. And that's what we need to do. We need to keep it beneficial. And so we need to be responsible for it and accountable for what is going to be next.
Pascal, damn, everyone's like, the chat's all about having minds blown. I love your call to action. You know, we've got to be the ones designing this. Someone else should be designing this, and you're doing exactly that. And I love how you've created super optimized prompts and made the process super accessible to students. You removed the difficulty in them receiving feedback or receiving support through the automated workflows you've created. That's fascinating. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome, John. Thanks for
Very
inviting me.
cool. No worries. Next up, actually, Mark, I might need your help. I think I've, oh no, I can do it. Don't worry. I think I've solved it. There we go. Next up, we've got Mark McElroy, who's also at Career International School, and I've had the great fortune of working with him before. Great teacher, fantastic coach, and someone who's exemplary at building capacity in others and inspiring leadership. So I'm really excited to have him along today. He's the Ed Tech Director at KIS currently. He's also picking up a new role soon to share a little bit more about some of the other tools besides ChatGPT that might be useful in teaching and learning in the 4 Cs. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, John. And Pascal, amazing. Joyce and Liz, it's an honor to be sharing that with you, and Ceci coming up as well. Pascal, it's really inspiring to hear what we've been talking about to a lot of teachers at our school and in other places about working to make the system itself, right? So not having to just live with what the system becomes, which is a really cool way to look at it. So I'm here to talk a little bit about the visualization tools that are out there. And so I remember when Midjourney and DALL-E began as an experiment with a bunch of people, maybe late last year. And I remember a lot of what I heard, especially from teachers, was, oh no, this is the end of creativity for humans. and it was going to stifle creativity. I heard it echoing down art hallways. How are we going to get past this? How are we going to continue to have human be the essence of creativity? I think after a few months of getting into it, we were beginning to see that these image visualization generation tools are actually really good at stimulating creativity, sparking creativity, and if projects are aligned correctly, really allowing students to show creativity in a lot of different ways, whether it be with prompt engineering, which we'll talk about, simply getting an idea of where to start, as Pascal has talked about, and also with just how to tell a story through images. So this is, in my mind, one of the coolest. I've seen a lot of images from Midjourney that have been generated, and this is one of my favorites. And when I first saw it, I thought, well, that in itself that's true. How are we going to get around this? That's so creative. That's such a cool, what looks to be a photo. And then when you looked at the prompt, you begin seeing that the prompt itself is extremely creative. And so when we first take a look at image generation, we're talking about prompt engineering, as we've talked about before. And so there's a lot of obviously literacy that goes on with this. You need to understand what gold kintsugi is. You need to understand ray tracing and the reflections from it. You need to understand what anti-aliasing is to get that image. And not only that, you have to be creative in the order of how you place those commands in there and the parameters of the prompt. You need to understand the weightings of what goes in and which pieces are going to come in. Because I know I put the very first section of that prompt in, and here's what I got. So you can see that it's not simply a matter of understanding that you need a super macro photograph. You need to understand the engineering piece of it. And so Pascal, I'm looking for you to help me with getting this with one of your APIs to help us get the prompts for students for these image generations. Another example is, again, a lot of different techniques go into this. And so students beginning to understand how they're using some of the stuff that they create physically, how to add some weights and how to put it in the right order to begin taking something from embroidery techniques and using it to kind of show, mimic a reality of nature. And this is what this kind of brings out. And of course, if you want to add just one other set to that prompt, you look at it and now it looks like something where there's actually these techniques in there. So I think that one of the things that we really need to think about is, as we've spoken before about Tano and the creation of prompts, that in image generation, it's the same. We can really teach a lot about creativity and how images are created and the processes and the techniques that go behind them. The second thing I'd want to talk about is teachers that I've worked with in the actual visual arts realm. They're using it at the beginning. It was like we have to kind of pull back and make sure the students are still learning techniques, but now they're using it to inspire the creativity of the techniques. And it's as simple as looking at perhaps different styles of art and how quickly you can generate them. So for example, here's our favorite vase of sunflowers. If you want students to get a quick idea of what different styles, either an expressionism or pointillism looks like, the creation of that image is less than 30 seconds. And what teachers are explaining to me is that it really gives students a stepping stone to master their technique. Because if they get caught in that creativity realm, they don't know where to go next. These are just kind of the next steps of getting and pushing them in a direction. And of course, not just the style of art, but also the medium of art, whether it be watercolor, for example, or spray painting, for example. And so getting students to get past that creative block and move along with mastering the techniques that they still use. So the second example is really just kind of sparking ideas in people when it comes to image generation and what they can create on their own to master their techniques. The third piece that I think is really, really important is how images can help us tell stories better. And so this is kind of a creativity in storytelling. And so we have students in upper elementary through middle school creating video games, and they do so in Bloxels, sometimes even in Scratch, but Bloxel, Scratch, and Unity. And part of that process itself is identifying protagonists and antagonists, some sort of conflict that's happening that you need to get past in your video game, and then some sort of resolution or conclusion and a setting that game happens in. And then, of course, programming the actions that go on, and you try to make it fun for people to play. But a lot of times we ask students, okay, how would you best hook someone to come play your video game? Because that's the story you're telling in your game, and you want people to engage with that and share that with you. And it's always been do you write an advertisement? Do you create a flyer for your video game? And a lot of times students they don't have the art skills to create what they want to attract someone to play their game or tell the story. And so we ask, how do you, as students, decide you want to play a video game? And most of them will say, well, it's because of the game cover. That's what intrigues me to get into playing the game. And so we provide students with a template. You can create this in Canva or Keynote or Illustrator, whatever you want. You give them some panels and you say, okay, this is your video game cover, and you need to tell the story of your game with images. And usually students buckle back and say, well, I don't know how to draw or do anything with the imaging part. And that's not the point. The point is, how do you tell the story? So you give them some ideas of what you put into these panels, and away you go and see what happens. And the first thing kids do is they write, this is of an upper elementary student who creating a game, and I don't quite understand the point of why the fox is trying to catch a fast train. But again, that's the point of the game, is there's a fox and has to get through some farmers and get onto a train, and that's what you're doing in the game itself. And what's interesting is this student was really interested in taking a look at the different kind of styles that you can create. But this is given to a teacher. Teacher creates this. Here's the cover of your video game. What do you think? And the students reflect back, as we were talking. Pascal talks about reflection. Joyce, we talk about what do we do with this? Well, those are the images that you put on your video game. Is it exciting? Is it enticing? Is it what's actually happening? And the students take a look at it and they say, well, no, I need to rethink my story. This is actually my story. So they sit down and they rewrite these panels and they come up with something that's just like the Tano, specific and detailed, because that's what we want in storytelling. And then it shows up something like this. Now, this student wasn't necessarily 100% happy with what came out of it, but this is actually something that's quite reflective of the game. And they were really excited because they were learning about human civilization and how it impacts the environment of animals and how animals needed to catch a train. I still don't quite know that part, why, but the animals couldn't get to the train because humans had impacted their environment. And so you want to create a little bit more of a story, and a little more complexity to it. You give them 2 panels to give them that image instead of 3, and you still say they have to do the same thing. Here was an example that was given. Here's the image that's generated. And what's interesting about this one is we saw creativity go backwards here. The student looked at that and said, why is a child trying to get to the family of robots? That was the game they created. They had a child trying to get through to a family of robots. And they said, well, maybe my protagonist should be a robot itself. So they went back to their game, changed the skins of their character, and rewrote their description of the story that they were trying to tell. And this is the image that they have on the face of their video game cover now. And then finally, of course, if you really want to try to tell a story in one picture, that's a huge storytelling capability and way to communicate and show creativity. So here was the beginning prompt that was given, along with what was generated. 2 things came out of this. If you're not specific in your prompt, obviously you're going to get sometimes a little bit of wacky imagery. But more importantly, the student did not like the depiction of the hero or the heroine in this, and changed it to be something that they wanted to see on the cover of their image. And I'd say that the 2 eyes of this dolphin shark kind of freaked me out, but they were really excited about the imagery of the heroine for their video game and thought this was a really cool cover for their video game. So I think as we go back, we want to look at imagery and how imagery can help in the creative process in general. But there's a creativity in the prompts themselves, and students can learn a lot about their own literacy, what they know, and how to put it in the right order to get something that they find is what they're looking for. And then, of course, the sparking of creativity with simple exemplars that are really generated quite fast. And then the last piece that I think is shown to be a cool project is like the driving of storytelling with images, without the technical need for younger learners to create those images themselves necessarily, but actually give the prompt behind it. And so I'll give you the example that I show the kids when I'm doing the video game cover. And this is a game that I probably did not write myself, but if you can figure out what game that is, then we will move on from there. So thanks. And again, it's been a pleasure. So enjoy, everybody.
Thanks, Mark. I love how you highlighted the sophistication involved in not only understanding the prompts, but crafting them and the language using them. I think that you just dived in with visual arts teachers somewhere there where it was immediately going to be a challenge and found a way to address it. And just the feedback loops involved in crafting a prompt, generating it, reflecting on it, and changing it was just wonderful as well. So thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of the tools, those AI generation tools, there's so many in what you're sharing as well. But even Canva just came out with a text image tool. Obviously, there's some really complex ones, but also ones that the younger kids can have access to right away. So
thanks, Glenn. Last but definitely not least, I've got to work with Ceci Gomez too before, Ceci Gomez Galvez before. I feel like half the people on the screen I've worked with, I've been fortunate to. She's currently the elementary school EAL coordinator at Saigon South International School. And she's incredibly innovative. She pushes the envelope and she always has student first in the work she's doing. She always wants to represent what's best for them. So I'm fascinated to see what she's going to share with us today.
Thank you so much, John. I feel like I just came in and I'm like having my mind blown. I'm still trying to process what Pascal said. And I'm sorry I'm late. I was participating in another webinar earlier. And then what Mark just shared, and I'm like, my ideas are just like, I'm getting all these ideas about the capacity for a tool like this to be used for language learners who are still learning, who are emergent bilinguals. They're still learning to use language and what that would mean for them to be able to generate stories with images. I mean, it's just kind of bananas. I'm going to say that. And what I'm going to present to you today really is just what my role entails in looking at GAI and also ChatGPT and how to build those communication bridges now that this tool is multilingual and polishing itself more and more, like what it could do 2 months ago with translating. I think now it's just moving into the translanguaging part. Like this artificial intelligence is actually very responsive to this to the need for building those communication bridges. So allow me so humbly to present to you this perspective that I have about what my role entails in empowering my community to stop being kind of afraid of ChatGPT and generative artificial intelligence, and seeing how it can work and partner and collaborate with us to be able to build bridges of communication within our multilingual communities and ecologies and ecosystems. So, and for me, where I come from is thinking about the community, thinking about the students, what they have access to, what that equity of access looks like for them. Whenever we send parent communications home, how do we make sure that parents are also receiving that clear communication about their child's learning experience in our schools in a language that they can mobilize fluently, so that, you know, clear is kind, right? So we want to make sure that our communities are able to engage with us back and forth. And I feel like the use of ChatGPT and these artificial intelligence tools can be our partner in being able to do something that has never been done before. We have never, the argument of having to have a representative of every single language in our community in order for us to create those bridges is now not as necessary as it would have been, or as impossible as it would have been a few years ago. So thinking of that community, I want everybody here to think of their community, and we're going to try to do an activity together, kind of like an interactive activity together. If you have a device with you, or if you want to do this on your MacBook, we are going to do a good old Mentimeter. So if you have your phone, you can just scan the QR code, or you can also go to mentimeter.com and enter the code at the top where it says enter code here. And I will share these slides. You can have these slides. You can click on that link as well. So there's 3 different ways you can access this Mentimeter. And I'm going to ask you to think about what languages are mobilized in your community. And by mobilized, I mean not what languages is everybody proficient in your community, but think about what languages surround you, your school, your community, your household, your friend groups. What languages are people, do you hear when you're walking down the street? What languages are represented in your classrooms or in your parent sessions? What languages do you mobilize yourself? And we're going to see some of our responses coming in. Oh, I can already see some responses. And I'm having an immediate connection to everybody here. Everybody's experience and environment is also multilingual. So I read I'm reading English, Spanish, Cantonese, French, German, Korean, Portuguese, Shanghainese, love it. Filipino, German, Bahasa, Yoruba, Slovak, Ukrainian, Shona, Spanish, Vietnamese, Hindi, traditional Mandarin, Taiwanese. We got it all. So as this continues to build, your communities are also multilingual ecosystems. So that bridge that you need to create for communication is also essential for the experience that not just your students are having, not just your communities of parents, but also yourself. If you mobilize other languages and you want to help build these bridges, but you can't speak all the languages, so what can you do? This is going to continue to populate, so keep going. We have a lot of participants today, so I'm sure that this is going to continue to populate. I love the linguistic representation here today, by the way, and within your communities. So ChatGPT, what it has helped me do is move from one language to multiple. And the way that I am training my bot, because that's what I did, I created my own bot. Its name, their name is MLL bot. And I use po.com. I have not yet dove into the world of all of artificial intelligence, but ChatGPT right now is kind of like my partner in this work. And I've created my own bot to help me start bridging that communication in this multilingual ecosystem in which I am a part of. So all of these translations that you see on the right are the word language in those different languages. And for those of you that are mobilizing other languages, I'm sure that you see some of your languages represented, and that is the direct translation. And I used my MLL bot to help me create this. So what I asked it was translate the word language into Spanish, Chinese, Korean, Shona, Hindi, Arabic, Italian, German, Russian, Vietnamese, and Japanese. And it did that in less than a few seconds, right? Which is awesome. We all know it can do that. And for those of you who are new at this ChatGPT AI world, it can do that, which is pretty cool. I've asked it also to translate other things more complex, and its accuracy is very exciting. I'm not one that is kind of doesn't shy away, or I'm not scared about it. I'm excited about the opportunity. But one thing that I really loved, I wanted to see what extent of language it can also do. So I asked it, how do you sign language in ASL? And I know that it cannot generate exactly the hand movements that would entail signing language, but it explained in detail how you sign the word language in American Sign Language. And like I said, when my question here on the left is what opportunities for bridging communication can you find as you explore leveraging GAI in multilingual ecosystems? So going from that, oh, I don't know if I should use it. It's a little scary. It's a little, it's the unknown. Will it replace us? All of these questions that people are having about artificial intelligence tools, I see them as opportunities to do something that we've never been able to do before. And I love playing with it. So at this moment, we're kind of in that learning phase too, almost kind of like in the storming part of our learning as well. A lot of inquiry, a lot of our teachers are exploring AI. I am building opportunities for the EAL team, especially to be able to have time to explore and see what they're coming up with. So I created this Padlet a couple of days ago, and it's basically just this curation of examples. I got into this amazing Twitter thread today with Stephen Taylor, and it was awesome to just see him share all of his tools. I've added some of them there. I've added some of the examples that I've been using ChatGPT as well. And I invite you to click on that Padlet. So here on this side, this is actually a link to a Padlet. So when I share the slides with you, and I promise I will in a second, you'll be able to access that Padlet and add your own ways in which you have been using ChatGPT in particular to build those bridges in communication within your multilingual ecosystems. So my presentation really is like, right now it's the introduction of a book that is missing all these chapters about how we're going to leverage this tool for communication. So I'm going to kind of finish now with not many examples, because we're still in the process of learning and exploring and inquiring. And so I invite you to do that with us too, and tell us what kinds of successes you have been having within your multilingual ecosystems and communities, and how it has created equitable access for the multilingual learners in your community. So thank you so much for inviting me to give this little 5-minute snippet, John. I am so excited and so honored to be here and surrounded by all these amazing people that I love and respect. So thank you so much. And I can't wait to see what you find and what you explore and put it on the Padlet for us so that we can share it together.
Thank you so much, Ceci. I love that the focus is on community. It was just about making more inclusive community, bridging those connections, and just really sparking that discussion, provoking people to think about it more deeply and the various ways that could work for them. And you built your own bot. You've already built your own bot. You and Pascal need to talk further, I think. Thank you, Ceci, so much. I appreciate it. We realize we're over time a bit. What we're going to do as a result is we'll put the Q&A at the end. So if you have to go, you can go now if you have to go. You can just watch the recording later and just get the notes. That's fine anyway. But just a couple more points, and then we'll have the Q&A at the end for those that can stay. Continuing the learning, we have those wonderful snapshots across the curriculum, across various aspects of school, from people in different international schools around the world and how they use ChatGPT to support the 4 Cs. What can you do if you want to continue your own learning journey right now? Simple things. So in the notes, we've got, the slides, you can keep exploring. So if you played with ChatGPT a bit, there are some other tools around. You might want to go look at Bing AI. You might want to look at Google Bard. You might want to look at Claude that's emerged now too. And this table will just give you an idea of what they're good for and what they're not great at before you dive too deep or sign up for accounts. So definitely check that out. This has blown my mind in the last week or so. Someone's taken access to ChatGPT, created their own program called AutoGPT that you can download. Now, it is a little bit on the nerdy side, some of the steps you need to take to pull this off. It works on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. You need to have a little bit of an understanding of command line or terminal. You've got to have access to Python, which is a coding language. You need to link to something online called Pinecone, which is how it allocates memory. And you have to pay for API access to ChatGPT. That sounds like a lot of work, right? All the instructions on how to do that are in that link at the top. Why do you want to do it? Because when you do, you can get ChatGPT to run automatically, completely autonomously, completely independently of an individual sitting there typing in prompts. You set it up as a machine, you give it some goals, you task it with doing something, and then you say how long you want it to run for, how many iterations, 10 iterations, 100, 1,000. And in this instance, I went a bit nerdy and I'm getting it to write an 80,000 word D&D novel, just because I was like, why not? What am I going to try? I got like a STEAM curriculum one running. I tried to do some ed tech work, but it's quirky. But what's fascinating more so than that, which is fascinating in itself, is that it downloads the files to your local computer. I noticed Peter Henniger asking about this before. So as it's writing the novel, it starts doing things like, well, this is where all the characters are. They're in this document. And this is where the plot hooks are. They're in this. And this is the spreadsheet that has information about all the monsters. Or these are images that have inspired the work there. So what AutoGPT does is allow these tools to work autonomously and allow the content they create to be downloaded to your machine while you're asleep, while you're not around. It's not perfect. I've read some pretty quirky stuff in there so far, but it's a really interesting thing to think about if you've got someone at your school that has the expertise to use it, or if it's something you just want to try yourself, because really all you're doing to get it set up is a bit of trying and failing, copying and pasting a bunch of stuff and installing some software. You do have to pay for special access to ChatGPT to get it to work, but definitely check that out if you want to push the limits a little bit. You probably need a robot. Fantastic community to subscribe to. Every couple of days, they come out with a newsletter saying, here's the top 5 things that you should have known about in the last few days regarding generative AI. And they're largely applicable to productivity, learning, and different industries around the world. And it's just really light, easy reading. and pretty compelling stuff that they share. So it suggests that you sign up for that as well. I find it useful. And please connect via ISS EDU. You would have seen today already, there's been a bunch of stuff shared to that hashtag. If you're doing your own explorations, creating your own frameworks, coming up with your own learning experiences, we'd love to hear about them. And it's a really nice way to share and build everyone up across the community. Really quickly, we want to know how to support you a little bit better in terms of the work we're doing. So if you could jump in the chat now, how might we continue to support your learning regarding AI? Do you want to know stuff that's more specific to working with early year students or in the learning design for early year students? Are you more interested in supporting bilingual and multilingual learners? Are you interested in the school operations side of how these tools could be beneficial? We'd love any feedback you could put into the chat because it'll help us craft learning experiences and resources that are hopefully more useful as we move into the next year as well. So feel free to keep typing that stuff in. We've got some really cool upcoming events going on. We've got one on data analytics next week with a crew from American School in Dubai. And the video they made to promote it is pretty funny and Matrix inspired. We've also got a session on conferring for those of you interested in taking your conferring further and diving deeper into the practice with Laura Benson in a couple of weeks. And then one which is really looking at mitigating operational and financial risks in schools. So more for the operational side. So you'll probably see ISS pretty much has teaching and learning PL, creativity and innovation, and then school ops. So have a check out of those. It's all at iss.edu. You can find them there. The links, I'll put them in the chat. Now, I think Mike and Dana, I think it's been shared a few times. I'll just copy and paste it back in. They're all the slides that we've used during this session. You'll access the recording. That'll be provided to you a bit later. Before I finish up, quick Q&A. I'm just going to jump in there. If you've got any burning questions that you would like to ask any of the panelists during the session, feel free to just press the QA button down the bottom and pop them in. I'm just going to have a quick scroll through. Panelists, can you see the Q&A? Yep, you can see it as well. I'm going to have a quick look and see what I can see. Oh, okay. So anonymous attendee at the top said, how do we create tables using ChatGPT? What happens is when you're doing that sort of Tano structure and the output, you can specifically say, I need it in a table format and I need X, Y, and Z headings, and it will structure it into a table and you can just copy that table and paste it into Numbers, Excel, Google Sheets, whatever you're using. Oh yeah, that's a good point from Schaefer about fiction. Is no ever really ever acceptable? Yeah, so that flowchart might apply to some industries more than others. Absolutely. What else have we got here? Okay, yeah, generative AI tools for younger learners. So you might know that a lot of these tools are restricted by age limit, and you might have to have conversations with parents about whether they're willing to let their child use it. And I love the way that Liz and Joyce promoted it and bridging that communication and even mitigating the risk by having Joyce do it on her end, and Pascal too by automating it in the middle. But yeah, there are some really good ones. A really simple one to use is perplexity.ai. It's a really simple search engine. And what it does is you can ask your query or compare and contrast, and it gives a really nice succinct answer, very short answer. And it also includes references or links to where it got the information. That could be a nice starting point for younger students. Anything else that I missed? Feel free to yell out if you want, panelists. Yeah, so I think Mark called this out too. They're asking about imagery. Midjourney is probably one of the more compelling tools. Mark, you might want to speak on this better than me. Tools out there for image generation. If you want to use ChatGPT, you can't, but the same company, OpenAI, make a program called DALL-E, and that's actually free to use, I believe, Mark. Whereas Midjourney is like credits.
Just went into paid mode, I think, like a week ago. They give you you got to buy credits now. The two that I was most recently turned on to, they're closest to Midjourney, not quite. I think powerful is the most. Midjourney is the most powerful and most compelling for that reason. Lots of parameters you can put in, so you can really dial in what you want. but something close to that is bluewillow.ai, which currently is totally free, as well as leonardo.ai, which has 150 free generations.
Oh, okay. So it's like premium, you get it free or a limited version for a while.
Yeah, and I would say for younger students, if you don't, the complexity of the image doesn't have to be as good. Even Canva education now has a text to image generation. It's not obviously anywhere near as powerful as the ones we've been talking about, but for a younger student, it can still put a cat on a surfboard in over the Empire State Building if you want.
Okay, nice. That's oh, sorry, I just got distracted by another question. Sorry, Peter Henniger has suggested if you are using Perplexity, it sometimes doesn't give good sources, which is good to know. And he uses I'm not exactly sure how to say this, a COPVL analysis on the answers. So I'm sure I could ChatGPT that and find out what that was to make sure that I guess they're getting accurate information. Anything else in there? Generating high school timetables. I don't know. That is a very big job. I bet you someone's working on it, or at least integration to do it, right? Because you always see the pain that administrators go through in doing it. Ah, okay. Someone may have just thought of a pretty good business idea there. I think we got most of them. The link for the slides is in there. I want to thank all our panelists for being involved. I want to thank Mike, Pierre. I want to thank Holly as well, and Dana for coming along and supporting us in our work we did today. I didn't miss anyone, did I? I think so. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your time. They're my contact details if you want to talk anything further about generative AI or ChatGPT. If you hit up Twitter on that hashtag, you're going to see all the panelists. I've tried to tag each and every one of them in there. So if you want to follow them and see what they're up to and the types of explorations and investigations they're engaging in, that'd be a good place to do it. But thank you all, and hopefully we'll see you at a future ISS event. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. And a recording and link to the slides will be coming to you later today. Thank you, everyone.